everyone, and welcome to the Metacast by Naavik, a podcast in which we explore the business and future of video games. I'm Aaron Bush, and today I have the absolute pleasure of talking to Alexis Bonte. Alexis is the COO of Stillfront Group, a global and growing group of gaming studios that publishes primarily on mobile and the web, and he is also an active board member and investor, among other accolades. And at Naavik, we've been longtime followers of Stillfront, so I'm really looking forward to diving in and learning more today. Alexis, welcome.
Thank you, Aaron. Very, very happy to have the chance to speak with you. And I'm an avid reader of Naavik, so always great to also speak with you. And I was very happy to actually meet you in person not that long ago.
Yeah, no, that was fun at Gamescom. Well, I guess to start, Alexis, could you quickly just tell us your games industry story and how that led to joining Stillfront, and then we'll dive in a bit more on all things Stillfront later in the conversation.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm actually, I'm part of this kind of generation that grew up playing games. I started with the Spectrum 48K, then the Amiga 500. It was the most exciting purchase I ever made, and saved years for it. Was a PC 386, so I could play Wing Commander, and I'm definitely a big games fan. I have way too many One More Turns of Civilization, so that's really clearly a passion for me, video games. And then I actually went into a different direction. I became an entrepreneur. I started a company out of business school that was called TradeOK.com when I was 21 years old. That didn't work out, but it was 2 years intense MBA, I call it. But it still resulted in an exit to Ipsos a few years after, so we were quite lucky. But that gave me the opportunity to meet the people at lastminute.com. So the founder of lastminute.com, a guy called Brent Oberman. And lastminute.com, for people who don't know it, was kind of the Expedia of Europe. Was one of kind of the first large, internet success stories. It also got battered a lot. It was the last company to IPO before the bubble burst back in 2000. So I think we IPO'd in April or March 2000, and then the bubble burst right after us. And so I was not a founder at lastminute.com. I was what we called founding team. Part of the founding team. So which means one of the first employees there, and was very lucky. We had a very crazy roller coaster ride. I think we were one of the first unicorns in Europe after the IPO. I think we were worth the company was worth like $1.1 billion, and we were making less revenue than the pub where we had our meetings. And then fast forward, to September 11, 2001. The whole tourism industry, completely crashed and stopped. And I think our market cap, we had $88 million in the bank, and our market cap was $48 million. We were worth less than half the cash we had in the bank. But just at that time, the business started to take over and started to work, because the airlines started giving us, stock. The hotels started giving us rooms to sell. The whole business basically started working when everyone thought we were dead. I think people were calling us lastminute.bomb, which was interesting. And then fast forward a few years, we sold the company in 2005 to Sabre for $1.1 billion. So at that time, I became financially independent and decided to pursue my childhood dream, which was to start a game studio. So I did a few angel investments here and there. Very bad ones, because I didn't know how to invest. So lost a big part of what I made in lastminute.com in bad investments. So if you want to know how to do bad investments, ask me. I've learned a bit since then, but that first phase of angel investment was really bad. But one of the things I wanted to do was to do video games. And I got quite early into basically I then got very frustrated, because I said I'm going to start playing again, because I didn't have time to play. I realized I couldn't play any games on my PC because my PC was not powerful enough. So I had to buy a new PC. Then there was all the anti-piracy stuff. And I think I lost my card that was in the box, so I couldn't even play the game that I bought. And I thought these strategy games, they should be online, right? And so went on, didn't know better, and decided, I'm going to find a team to help me do a civilization on the browser with real people. And that game's called eRepublic.com. it was very full of flaws. I co-designed that with a team of, we were 6 people. We did it in 6 months for the beta. And I mean, it was so badly programmed that we were hacked by 4chan within 3 days of releasing it, and they replaced every image with a Pokemon. But we fixed it and we stuck with it, and in time, it's a game that was been played by more than 10 million people. It's actually still going. There's an incredible community around it. Much smaller now, about 50,000 people play it, but still a profitable and running game. And that was the foundation of eRepublic Labs. After that, I tried to design other games that were all unsuccessful, and realized that maybe I was a better manager than a game designer. So surrounded myself with other people that knew what they were doing, and eventually were able to successfully pivot into mobile games and start doing 4X strategy games with an historical context, because we couldn't afford an IP. So we thought, hey, what's an IP everybody understands and is cheap? And so we started doing, Age of Lords, which is a medieval themed 4X strategy game. Then after that, we did a World War II game called World at War. And at that time, the studio started becoming, very profitable, growing quite fast. And we got spotted by all the usual suspects, the Ubisofts, the Vivendis, the EAs, who approached us to acquire us. And at the time, I realized that, I'd seen, I started at the same time or a bit before, people like Ilke at Supercell or Ricardo at King, were all friends. And clearly, eRepublic had a nice business that was profitable, but it was never going to be by itself the next Supercell, the next King. And I know what a billion-dollar business looks like. And that's not what we had with eRepublic. So I realized that I need to basically either sell this or join forces with other people to make this bigger. And that's how, I ended up meeting Stillfront.
Gotcha. No, thanks for sharing that story. And fun fact, when I was doing my research for this conversation, I stumbled across your YouTube channel, including your 60-second pitch for eRepublic from 2008, along with, introducing your beta and things like that. But it was fun. It was fun to see.
I did that pitch from hospital.
Really?
Yeah. I was just out of a really bad operation, and I was basically, I think I had 2 days after the operation, I was in a really bad state, but I had to do the pitch, so that's when I did the pitch.
Oh man. Well, whatever the case, I'm sure your 14 years ago self would be proud of where you ended up today. Maybe surprised of some of the twists and turns that have happened along the way. But I guess to zoom forward to Stillfront, we don't need to go through all the history there. If anything, I'd just kind of like to zoom to the present and just catch people up to speed about like what exactly Stillfront is today. So I guess, Alexis, could you just paint the picture of what is Stillfront in 2022?
Yeah, I mean, so Stillfront today is 23 game studios across the world. 1,600 people, game professionals that work in those studios. Still, quite a light headquarter team, although we have strengthened the team at headquarter. We are strong believers that really the studios are where the core and where the talent needs to be. We're big believers in the fact that you need to keep decisions as close as possible to the players as possible. So we have this kind of inverted pyramid kind of system, similar to Supercell, where you're trying to have as much of the decision as possible with the game teams. The studio heads are there to, get, allow the game teams to basically do their job. And at headquarters, we're kind of, providing support governance to the studio heads, and also more and more, what we call kind of growth acceleration, finding collaborations, finding synergies. And that's really one of the things that is least understood about Stillfront, is that we work extremely hard on synergies and collaborations across the studios. That's the thing that actually convinced me to join Stillfront when I was at eRepublic. It was the fact that I was going to get access to all of this collective intelligence in terms of shared knowledge at the beginning, but also potentially game engines, stronger, marketing talent, things that I could not have by being a small studio. But at the same time, I really enjoyed having a small studio, but I wanted to be able to punch like a large studio, and that's what we're trying to create here at Stillfront, and that we've been basically building on more and more.
Gotcha. Well, let's break that down in a couple ways. I guess first, just to poke a bit deeper into the centralization versus decentralization lens, could you talk a bit more about that, what that really means in practice? Like, what exactly is centralized versus what exactly is decentralized, and why
So,
is that?
so the first thing we try to, I don't like to say the word centralized, because then actually you'll see even the way we centralize, we do it a bit differently. But let's for simplicity's sake, let's say centralize. The first thing we try to centralize is all the boring stuff. At least all the boring stuff if you're a game maker. I don't think it's boring if you do it well. So, for example, everything that's like related to finance, for example. A lot of those studios that we've acquired, they'd be, some of them will be 30, 40, 50 people studios. In certain cases, Candy Writer, when we acquired them, were there was just 10 of them. They don't necessarily have a very strong finance function, and they're definitely not necessarily ready to be part of a public company. So for that, we have also actually distributed the system. So we have a financial hub in the US and we have a financial hub in Europe. And they will basically, depending on the studio, cover from 100% to 50% of all kind of the finance and accounting needs and all this sort of stuff. So that's the first thing. Same thing for legal and all this sort of stuff. So that's kind of all the kind of the administrative stuff we try and get out of the way of the studios when necessary, and kind of help them collaborate. One thing where we realized, and we didn't do it at the beginning, that was necessary, was and that's the more exciting stuff, and that we're just starting with it, is all kind of the talent stuff. So certain studios, they will have a few HR or talent professionals. Some studios won't have it, but there's a clear need of coordination across our studios. There's a clear need to really help, not just in terms of recruitment, but career path and all this sort of stuff. And that's something we just recruited a head of talent. She's called Elisa. She used to work with me at lastminute.com, actually. So I'm very happy that she was happy to work with me again. And she's basically going to help me, make sure that we get all of the talent teams working together in a closer way. Right now, it was happening in the more kind of informal, shared knowledge way, and we're going to have a kind of much more like centralized collaboration way of doing this. We still keep the talent, at the studio levels, but we make sure that it works together. So that's another way. Let's go into stuff that really has a more clearly direct impact in terms of numbers and revenues. So another thing that we've been doing since the beginning, since we've acquired Good Game Studios. So Good Game Studios had quite a large marketing team that was very, very strong in performance marketing. Definitely, they were able to work with much more channels than most of our other studios were able to work. Most of our other studios had maybe 1 or 2 or 3 marketing professionals, not 20 or 30. So what we did is we basically set up the Good Game Studios team as a marketing hub that is able to provide a variety of services, mostly performance marketing, but now we want to extend that to other things like go-to-market and other things that you need to all of our studios. And so some of our studios use the marketing hub completely and have completely outsourced their marketing to the marketing hub. But that's always challenging because, as you know, you want the marketing team to be as close as possible to the game team. So that doesn't necessarily mean that they are working in Hamburg. So that's where we have to be careful. But and some studios will just outsource working with certain channels, because, as you know, since IDFA, one of the really important things and one of the big challenges for startups is, whereas before you were able to scale a new game just by using Facebook and then extend into other channels, now if you want to launch a new game successfully, you probably have to work with 20 different marketing channels. So that's something that we're able to give to all of our studios. So that's another part, is the marketing hub. And then maybe just to focus on the most important ones. Another one, which is very simple, is engine shares. Doing games is difficult. It's super hard. As you know, most often than not, you're going to start a prototype and you're going to have to kill prototype after prototype. You're going to do a soft launch and the game looks great, and then they will be missing all the KPIs are great except one KPI, and you can't fix it, and you just simply can't launch the game and scale it. And some studios who will try for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and might not succeed, right? Well, the advantage we have is we have engines, game engines that we know work and that we know function. And sometimes our studios that have this game engines don't have the capacity to do other versions of that game, maybe another historical theme or for another market. A good example is the grand strategy engine that we have for Bytro, which is a different type of strategy game. Is different to 4X. It's quite unique, actually, quite special. And well, that engine has been used by another studio called Dorado to create, actually what is one of our latest largest success games, a game called Conflict of Nation. That is a game that, is doing tens of millions of euros since launch. And that's a game that was only possible because, we could do the engine share. And we have other engine shares of this kind. Another thing that we've been doing is, for example, BitLife is a very successful game from Candywriter. Candywriter is a small team. They didn't really have the ability. It's a word-based game with a very complex language. So it's not a simple localization to turn into another languages. It's actually, you have to reprogram and do a lot of work there. And so Good Game Studios was able to take the BitLife engine and do a Spanish version, a Portuguese version, and we'll be doing other versions of that game. And we have many, many other examples of that. And that's really one of the keys as to why in what is a difficult market, according to many, many analysis, it's the mobile games market, at least in the Western countries, has been declining this year. I think it's temporary. I think we'll return to growth next year, but it's been declining. And we've been able to actually beat the market in terms of growth. Barely, it's been very difficult, but we've been able to have positive organic growth in the last 2 quarters.
Awesome. There's a lot there to unpack. So thanks for walking through all of that. Yeah, I mean, I've noticed too that like what is often misunderstood about Stillfront just sort of lies like in that model that you described, just being different from what many other teams across the games industry have seen. And it's probably one of those things that it's hard to really get a good grasp on from the outside without like experiencing some of like the actual like synergies that you laid out. Like once you're in it, what like, you like, then you start to get the feeling of, oh, now I can focus on the things that matter most to my team. Oh, now I can focus more efficiently on, whether it's UA or whether it's, whatever function, because of the support from the parent company, allowing it to be structured a bit more differently to enable, all these teams to not have to focus on it themselves. And I imagine too, even for you and the rest of the leadership team, you probably didn't have all the answers, both at the very beginning, but even just over the past few years, it's been a learning journey of how do you manage this kind of business and this industry. And so I'm curious if you have any like top learnings from the past few years on how you've like improved on this system over time.
Yeah, I mean it's completely correct. We keep learning on this, and it's really difficult to do. I mean, quite honestly, it is not easy to do. We're definitely at the opposite spectrum of a bunch of bankers just adding studios. That's definitely not what we're doing. Each time. So the way we do it first is every single studio that we've acquired, every single studio that's kind of joined the Stillfront group. We've always been thinking, okay, what can this bring to the puzzle that we don't have? What is the piece of the puzzle that we're missing? So take, for example, 6 Waves, right? Japan is one of the biggest markets in games. It was minuscule for us in terms of revenues. We couldn't really break through. We had one of our games, Big Farm Mobile Harvest, which was doing okay. I think it was about 8% of revenue was coming from Japan. But none of our other games could break into Japan and work in Japan. So we ended up to find Japan as a market that would be interesting. And then if we're able to break into it, or if we found the right way to break into it, that could bring, a lot of value to our other studios, right? Because we had games which potentially could get in. And so that 6 Waves is specialized in publishing, other studios' games in Japan. And and they're actually just happens they do 4X strategy games, which is something which is very close to our hearts because that's where we all started, at least the initial studio. So we could understand that very well. And obviously, when they do publishing deals with third parties, they have to give a percentage of their revenues to that third party. So we're going to continue doing that, but we're going to add to that to 6waves. Well, now why don't you publish our own games in Japan as well? And all of that revenue share stays within the group. So we improve your margins and we allow our games to break into Japan. So that's one way that we were able to do it. But of course, that's full of difficulties. There's some games that we thought would work in Japan, and then 6waves tells us actually, this kind of game is never going to work in Japan. So a lot of your assumptions, you need to know a lot of your assumptions are probably going to be wrong, and you need to discuss them upfront with the studios. And then some things, won't work. So another thing that we did is, we never force the studio to say, oh, you've got to work with the marketing hub now because, it's going to be much better. We spend a lot of time to convincing. We do like the marketing hub does a free audit of what they're doing and say, hey, we think we could help you with these channels and all that. And what you learn is sometimes, the studio say, well, thanks, but no thanks, we're not going to do it. And then you learn that and then you see, they lose 6 months and then they go back to marketing hub and they do it. It's like, maybe we should have been a bit more decisive, a bit more insistent with the studio. And so I think maybe that's one of the learnings is it's very difficult to get the right balance between not forcing a studio to do something. And also when you really know that they're missing out on something, how do you make them see faster that this is the right thing to do without ever falling into a situation where they lose ownership and responsibility? Because the day the studio heads and the game teams lose the ownership and the responsibility of what they're doing, and they feel like they're only doing what I tell them to do or what the people who work with me tell them to do, that's the day the model breaks.
Right. And I'm sure there's a balance the balance there is pretty difficult to strike sometimes, especially now that you have 23 studios. Just like me even trying to figure out how you manage all of those pieces and make sure that you're thinking thoughtfully about each one. Seems like a big growing task. But the part that I want to double click into a bit more is on that cultural side of things. I'm curious what it means to be part of the Stillfront family. And that's a phrase that I've heard, thrown out a lot, even with the latest 6waves acquisition, all of the press releases and such, excited to welcome 6waves to the Stillfront family. And so I'm curious, how do you foster that culture of togetherness while still enabling all these teams to operate mostly autonomously, still mostly entrepreneurially, but still as one team?
It's very difficult. The way we do it, it's through a lot of work. So obviously, I have a team that helps me. So they're all very experienced, VP, SVP level, industry professionals that have been, working in this for a long time. So in the US, I have Amy, she's ex Activision. And she's helping me kind of, provide the support and governance mostly to the US studios. In Europe, we have Harmin Busan, who's the ex CFO, CPO of Inno Games, and he's helping me, with mostly the European studios. Then I have, for the rest of the world, I have Alexis, who's ex Google Play and ex Wahey, who's helping me with those studios as well. So they basically are on a almost kind of daily contact, or at least weekly contact with the key people in the studios to make sure that that things are going the right way, to make sure they're not missing any collaboration opportunities and all sorts of stuff. So that's really a day-to-day work, making sure that they speak with each other. So that's kind of the kind of, I would say, the top-down kind of work. And obviously we have the usual stuff. It's we have a tool called Stillbase. It sounds really basic, but we have a Stillbase in there. It goes from onboarding, a mini onboarding mini game that explains to you what it means to be part of the Stillfront family, part of a public company, to an address book with everyone's picture. Because if I get an email from Aaron at I don't know where, it's 1,600 people. I might not know who Aaron is. I go to the address book and I have the list of not only what you do, but actually your skill sets, what you're very good at, and all that sort of stuff. So that helps as well. And then we have what we call, regular meetings. So we're actually going very soon to Jordan, 70 of us. So all of the studio execs, and we're going to meet at what we call StillCon in Jordan. And we do that twice a year, where all of the execs meet. And then we do that also. We started doing that also by line. So we had a marketing team meeting in Hamburg a few weeks ago, where all of the marketing professionals from different studios got together, and we're doing one for live operations specialists in a few weeks. So we get the companies and the guys from different studios to actually meet physically. Not just, of course, we have the Slack groups and all that, but I'm a big believer in people have to meet and have a beer together, do something together in order to then they can go back to remote, hybrid, whatever it is, but they need to meet from time to time. So we really work very hard in doing this. And I've actually just sent today the agenda for StillCon in Jordan, and that's something that has gone through 10 iterations, making sure that these workshops, it's not just Jorgen and I saying, here's the strategy and here's what we're doing. Actually, every studio is talking. We're actually, it's probably 10% Jorgen and I talking, and 80 or 90%, the studios talking about specific important things that help everybody.
Gotcha. No, that's really interesting. I'm personally just obsessed and love talking about structure and how to manage, growth and large teams under, when you have unique objectives and you're operating a bit differently. So it's all super fascinating to me to watch you guys execute and figure this out. So yeah, great job so far on figuring out how to do this.
And we're still learning and we're making mistakes. The key thing is not the problem is not that we make mistakes. We will always make mistakes. Is realizing that we made the mistake quickly and fixing it quickly. And that you can do it by having a culture of openness, trust, humility, and zero politics. I am completely allergic to politics. The moment I see something that remotely looks like politics, I take my bazooka and I shoot it. So that's another thing. I think that politics is the death of companies. So that's something that we've been very, very careful about. Making sure that everybody gets very direct and very frank feedback. In terms of how we're doing things, not always easy, and sometimes it can be hard. But I think it's the only way to work. It's the only respectful way to work with people.
Right. Yeah, that's great advice. Shoot your politics with a bazooka. I love it. Yep. So let's go ahead and talk about M&A, which has been a cornerstone of Stillfront's strategy over the past decade or so at this point. I guess just to set off that part of the conversation, just at a high level, what does Stillfront look for in its acquisitions? Any checklist points? What makes you look at a company and say, that one would be great for the Stillfront Group?
Yeah, I think the first thing that we look at is what are we missing, in terms of game vertical, where we'd like to be. We're quite weak, for example, in the sports vertical, like racing vertical, RPG vertical also could be better. So very interested in game verticals where you can have evergreen games. So that's really the key for us. So that's why you've seen us stay away from hyper casual. I think that's very hard to manage. It gives you a lot of volatility. So we went into casual games, but we try to avoid the hyper volatile casual games that you get with hyper casual. So that's the first thing we look at. Our geography as well. Is this acquisition going to allow us to enter a new geography and then basically bring our portfolio of games? We now have something like 74 games in the active portfolio. Can we bring some of our games there and get some extra growth for our studios? So that's another thing. So game genre, geography, and then there's some very clear things that we look at. A lot of us, still a lot of our studios are still managed by the founders, entrepreneurs. I myself, as you know, I'm a game founder. We're all shareholders of Stillfront. None of us is a majority shareholder. There's many studio heads actually right now that have more shares than I have in Stillfront. But we hold this, right? So it's our money. So we treat it like our money. So we're quite demanding for anyone that joins the family. And this is where it becomes the family because, again, it's our money. And it's the shareholders' money and our money because we're shareholders. And And here, what we do is we look for game studios that have a lot of experience. I think there's nothing that replaces experience. So I'm always very careful when I see a game studio that has massive immediate success on their first game, and and try and sell right away. They've never had a failure. I've tried to stay away from those studios because I know that they're going to have failure. This is the nature of the business. You're going to have successes and failures no matter what happens. And the good teams are the teams that have been through success and failure, and they have been able to stick together and then have another success, right? So that's what I look for. This other thing that we look for is profitable studios. This is a very hard business. It's very difficult to become profitable, as we all know. Once you break through, it's an amazing business, a great business, but to get there is a very high bar. And it's a very exclusive club of studios that have been able to not only be profitable for several years. So that's the other thing that we look for, because that means that's people that know what they're doing, if you find that. And the final thing, which is the most important, is is this someone that I will trust and will trust me and will have the humility to listen if we give feedback? Because yes, we want to give you as much autonomy as possible, but that doesn't mean that you do whatever you want. And it is important. We don't have a green lighting process, but if you have a pet project and it is a pet project, and I tell you it's a pet project, listen, because and yes, I'm not going to force you to close it down, but if a few of us tell you it's a pet project and your peers from other studios tell you this looks like a pet project, the KPIs are not there, I mean, the game team should take the decision to kill the game. And are these teams that are going to listen to that? I think that's important.
Right. And, as we mentioned, Stillfront's been doing this for about a decade now. And over the past few years has accelerated its pace of deals as the company has grown too. And, as the market was more favorable to a faster pace of deals too. I'm curious what the team has learned about successful M&A in the process. I think you just shared a great list of features that you look for, but through like any mistakes or just as you've gone along, how have you and the Stillfront team improved in M&A in ways other teams can learn from?
Yeah, I think first of all, I think that it's a market where there's still quite a lot of good M&A opportunities. I think there's been a correction. There's a correction in the market that we saw obviously in the public companies. We've all had a big haircut on our multiple and valuations. I think the private markets always take a bit more time to react to that. But I think now we're seeing a situation where the private markets have caught on to that, and you're seeing opportunities at more reasonable valuations versus where we were today. So I think there's ongoing opportunities in M&A, and we're still looking at a lot of opportunities. And I think there's good companies potentially. What I've learned is, and what we've learned collectively is, don't rush it. Get to know the teams. Some of the teams that became part of the family, we've been speaking with since I joined, and they so they've been maybe 3 years before they join us, and then it's not the right timing, and we correct, or it's not the right valuation or not the right pricing, but we keep on talking. So these things can take years. It's about building the relationship, understanding who it is. So that's the first thing that is important. The second thing, where I think we've been quite disciplined, especially when valuations were getting a little crazy, is if you have troubles justifying the numbers, and if the numbers that you get from the team, make sure that ignore the investment banker numbers, because the investment banker will always show you an hockey stick. Just ignore that. Do your own scenarios, do your own numbers from what discuss that with the team and understand that. And if you can't get a valuation that makes sense versus what you think the company is capable of, even with your help, versus what the investment banker is telling you the company will do, just walk away. And I think we've been quite disciplined in doing that. I mean, we've made 18 acquisitions. Some acquisitions right now look much more successful than others. But I don't think you can judge an acquisition in the first year or in the first 2 years after the acquisition. I think you need to judge an acquisition after 5 years. and that's when you know if it's worked out or not. I mean, we're quite open, for example, about Super Free not performing very well right after the acquisition, and now in the past 3 quarters they've launched for I think 3 games in a row that have been successful. So it's constant work that you need to do. So I think that's another learning is the company that you acquired that just kills it 6 months after acquisition doesn't mean that it's okay, it's all good, just let it go, it's going to be fine. And the company that's not doing so well 6 months after the acquisition, that doesn't mean that that's an acquisition where you made a mistake. If you made your homework before and if you paid a fair price for it, I mean, which can happen, unless something massive happens that breaks your assumptions, then there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to make that a successful acquisition.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard work.
Gotcha. What about on the after the acquisition closes? Any best practices, lessons learned about now that a team is in? How do you successfully integrate them, get them up to speed with how Stillfront operates? It might be easier for you guys than other teams considering the level of autonomy that you give, but even so, any lessons learned there?
Yeah, no, I mean, so we have an onboarding process that's actually quite honed by now because it's 18 acquisitions, at least since I've joined. I think the learning there is be very, very disciplined about your onboarding process. One thing I think where it was definitely more challenging is the acquisitions we made during the COVID period, where we were not able to meet face to face the founders, or go and see the founders face to face during the onboarding period. I think that's a lot more challenging. A lot of stuff gets lost in translation. So I'm not saying hopefully we'll never have a situation like that again. But definitely, you need to be foot on the ground, meet the studios, be with them. That's why I spend so much time on airplanes, and so does my team. Is we try and go and visit the studios very regularly. FaceTime is important. There's a lot of stuff that you can do over Zoom, email, but then there's the intangible stuff in any M&A deal is super, super important. So I think some of the challenges that we had more recently were definitely linked to the fact that we were not able to meet face to face, because that creates communication issues and also stuff and all that actually gets solved in an hour or 2 hours if you just face to face.
Right. Last question on M&A from me. Just from, putting my investor hat on, having, studied a bunch of other, more acquisitive oriented companies in the past, one thing I've noticed is that, as a company acquires and grows, in order to, continue moving the needle in the same way, obviously organic growth is a part of that formula for sure, but it often means that the teams need to either acquire more companies or acquire bigger companies or some mix of that in order to continue growing at whatever pace you're looking for in public markets. But obviously, when you do that, that comes with risk, right? Accelerating the pace of acquisitions or the size of deals means there are just more pieces to think about and more places to go wrong. So I'm curious from your lens, as a public company who's now acquired 18 businesses and is larger than you used to be. How do you think about mitigating those risks or thinking about the opportunities there?
Yeah, I think it's about making sure that you're scaling at the right speed and the speed where your team and processes and tools can absorb. I think that's one of the things. So that's why we famously say that we want to be light at the headquarter level, but we have recruited quite actively, a team to basically allow us to scale there better. We also, we've always been about 2 legs. We have the M&A leg and we have the organic growth leg. And it's very important to make sure that we're putting the effort that we need to put in terms of making sure that we have this organic growth engine, working. For us, it's people forget that we have a lot of very mature games, right? So the fact that we are mature in terms of they've been around for a long time, so it's pretty. So I think people have not really realized that it's pretty exceptional that we've been able to grow faster than the market, with games that have been around in certain cases for 7, 8, 9, 10 years, right? So clearly that engine is working. And of course, with 23 games, you're always going to have a game which has an issue, and you're always going to have a game that works. So hopefully you hope that things balance out. And over a year, full year, over 2 years, it always balances out. But you always have a quarter where it's harder because maybe, this quarter you were unlucky at three, you had problems with 3 games, and you didn't have a good surprise with 1 game. And the next quarter you have a good surprise with 3 games. So that's something that you'll never be able to fully control. But what I can control is how we grow over the long term and kind of improving the processes there and all that. And in terms of M&A, I think, again, it's about discipline. I think if we're able to have this long-term, stable organic growth, then the pressure to do ever bigger M&A deals and take ever more risks is not really there that much. And sometimes a small M&A deal could, in our case, if you do synergies, could have a big bang. So if you look at, let's look at a small acquisition. So a studio called Babel, which was actually acquired at the same time as it was acquired. I think that's a studio that when it was acquired was making, I think, $3-4 million of revenues. But it was a publisher in the Middle East. And by being part of Stillfront, we were able to basically get that publisher to get access to games and marketing resources that he definitely didn't have before. And now that's a studio that's grown close to 10x since then. And that's a big impact. So sometimes you don't have to do a very big M&A acquisition to have a big impact, if that makes any sense, if you have your synergies lined up in the right way. So that's how we're trying to think about it. If you think about it, that's how we think about, kind of having different pieces of the puzzle. And sometimes, we'll take a bit more risk on certain things. We're still entrepreneurial.
Right. Before talking about the future of Stillfront and other things that you're excited about, really quickly, I just want to touch on just the notable changes in the mobile games industry that we've seen. Obviously, you mentioned IDFA. That's definitely been one of the big influences lately. But I'm curious how Stillfront thinks about adapting to the headwinds in the mobile games industry. Where you see opportunity to double down, what you are or are not worried about. Would just love your take on what's going on and how you're thinking about moving forward through this.
I mean, first of all, I think we're incredibly lucky to be working in this industry. I mean, it's an amazing industry. I mean, what kind of industry is there in the world where you can have a team of 5, 7, 10, 15 people that create a product, a game, that can be played worldwide by millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people, and can generate, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of revenues. I mean, that's pretty incredible. It's very hard to get. And I think it's become harder and you need more things to get there, but it's still possible. You still see it. I think that's the first thing that, to me, that's the thing that keeps me excited all the time, is the incredible reach that just a few talented people can have and the number of people that you can impact. And quite frankly, just create hobbies for people, which is super cool. Just give people, fun and entertainment and create a hobby for them and something that they enjoy doing and create relationships between them. So to me, that's really the fundamental thing that drives me is the ability to do that and touch many people with fun products, fun games. And we all have I know for you, maybe a 4X strategy game, might not be a lot of fun, but for other people, it's super. And for me, a mastery game might not be, my idea of fun, but for someone else, it's their idea of fun. So I think that's really incredible. I think the things that in terms of the industry, I think there's a few things that are happening. The first thing is VC money is drying up a little bit for the normal free-to-play studios. And I think that's, if you link that with the difficulty to scale for new games, I think that's making it a bit more difficult if you're not a super talented team, a very strong team to basically launch a new studio and create it. But the flip side of that is if you're a super talented team that's really good, that knows what they're doing, you've got less competition. So I think you can do. I think it's an opportunity as well. So that's one side of the equation. I think the other side is obviously, the gold rush around Web3 is now, is kind of, quieted down as we're entering into a crypto winter. Some people actually saying it's not a crypto winter, it's a crypto ice age. I don't know what's going to happen. And I think that's actually a good thing because you had a lot of confusion, a lot of very bad teams doing, crap. But when you think about it, some of the fundamentals behind, doing Web3 games, which is about, the whole idea of, ownership and, generating things around, your generated content and potentially getting rewarded for the content that you create and all sorts of stuff are really interesting. So as an investor, I've invested in a lot of startups that I think are the more serious ones that are working in the space. And it's a space I'm looking at very, very closely, obviously. So I think there's a lot of opportunities. There's still a lot of cash because the VCs have raised a lot of money and are interested in investing, but they're no longer investing over the weekend. You're going to have to go through DD now, which is what I had to go through when I started my company. Welcome to the real world. So I think that's another interesting aspect that I think is going to develop. And and in terms of, I think we're going to continue seeing consolidation, and we're going to continue seeing M&A. Maybe not as big M&A as we saw in the past 2 years, because first of all, the big targets, there's less big targets. But I think we're going to continue seeing a bit of that, and there's going to be opportunity to that. The thing I personally worry about, and it's challenging, is the creativity. It's so difficult to break through with a game and make it work. That for us, obviously, it's a lot easier to have a success by it used to be, as 20% innovation, 80% standing on the shoulder of giants, right? And I think that was the right balance to do a successful game, right? For a long, long time. And then if you put the engine into that, we're probably at the 90%, 10%. But how do we make sure that we also are able to do the slightly more creative games that have the sort of breakthroughs that you want to have? So that's one of the things that I worry about. I don't think it's a problem right now immediately for us. But it's something that definitely keeps me awake at night in terms of how can we make sure that we get that right balance in terms of innovation that allows us to continue succeeding in the market. And I think that's linked to talent, that's linked to empowerment, that's linked to giving them the right tools, that's linked to trust and to knowing that you can fail, which is one of the advantages of being part of Stillfront is we're a very profitable company. We have very positive cash flow. So we're in a situation where we can take some of the risks that maybe would be harder to take if you weren't in that environment.
Gotcha. And looking forward into the future, if you had to call out maybe one or two things about what you're excited about in Stillfront's future that we haven't discussed yet, what would you call out?
I mean, I'm going to be honest. I think we've just scratched the surface.
I love it.
I honestly think we're just getting started in terms of what you can do with leveraging talent where it is, right? With this approach of this mix of having centralized tools and centralized processes and coordination, but that leverages local talent and having talent collaborate and do things together. I think we're just at the beginning of that, and also in terms of tool sets of things that if you look at it, in our marketing hub, we're great at performance marketing, but there's a lot of stuff that have changed in terms of go-to-market that we can build up and do better. I just have an endless task list of things to do. The hard thing is to prioritize, what is going to make the most difference next in terms of, really helping our growth. So, but if I had to kind of, zoom in terms of, I think what's exciting, I think we have a real opportunity in terms of, bringing games to Japan right now with 6 Waves, which we're working on. And I don't know if the first one or the second one or the third one is going to work out, but we'll probably have a few failures before we get it right. But I think eventually we'll get it right because we just have the knowledge and we have the deeper portfolio to do that. So I think that's quite exciting. I think a quite overlooked acquisition that we made is Joe Walker. Joe Walker is a really interesting games company. Basically, it's an app, which when we acquired them, I think they had about 27 games in the app. Now it's about 40 games in the app. So it's really an ecosystem with, the whole cross promo that people are talking about, getting people to play several games and all that. We've got that with Joe Walker. And I can see the KPIs. And I see how well that company is performing and how strong it is in the MENA region. And that is very exciting to me because there's a lot of insights there that I can take and I say, okay, Joe Walker could potentially be a mini version of what the whole Stillfront could be in the future if we do this right. Obviously differently, but it's giving us a lot of insight. So that I'm very excited about as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll have to pay more attention to that too. That sounds exciting. We don't really have time to do this last question justice, but I just want to ask you. You can give me your rapid fire response. Through preparing for this interview, I noticed that you're on the board of the Tezos Foundation, and on LinkedIn, you say a lot of your early stage investing has an emphasis on Web3, which you also just briefly hit on. I'm curious, what do you need to see in order for Stillfront to make its first move into that space? Or do you think that's not going to happen? Would just love to hear your quick take on that.
What's telling you that we're not working on this already?
Oh, okay. Awesome. Well, maybe we'll just leave it there then, and it'll be a good tease for everyone. Alexis, final question.
Please don't headline with it. We're doing R&D around this.
Okay. Good to know.
Please don't make it an headline. We're a public company. We have to be careful about what we say. But obviously, we're doing R&D, and we have teams that are looking into the space very seriously.
Awesome. Well, that's great to hear. And just wrapping up, if listeners want to learn more about Stillfront or best follow you, where's the best place to do that?
I mean, they're welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn or on Twitter. I'm at Alexis Bonte on Twitter. And obviously, they can always email me at alexis@stillfront.com.
Awesome. Well, Alexis, thank you again for joining me today. I always love learning more about Stillfront, hearing about what you've learned from operating this business with the great team that you have. So thanks again for coming on. And I look forward to watching where you all take the business next.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you very much.
Awesome. And to all of our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to give us a like, subscribe 5 stars. It would mean a lot. We'll put the links to all things Alexis and Stillfront in the episode description below. And of course, we'll drop some links to Naavik's resources as well. So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.